Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining today's webinar. I am now going to hand over the mic to Mark Spool, the president of Philly ATD. Apologies, everyone. So now I'm going to hand over the mic over to Mark Spool, the president of Philadelphia chapter.
Thank you, Jillian. Jillian, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today's Greater Philadelphia Chapter of ATD's webinar series. And today's program is called Designing Great Digital Programs, Blending the Art of Teaching and the Science of Learning with Alan Todd and Ryan Taylor of CorpU. As Jillian said, I'm Mark Spool. I'm the chapter president. I would like to first mention and thank my co-lead Josh Slatkin, as well as our chapter administrator Elena Rogers and Jillian Dotson, who is our technical director. And before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to draw your attention to some upcoming webinars we have. So we have a lot in June, and we have many coming up. So on June 16th, we have a chapter webinar called A Look Ahead, the Now and the Next of Learning and Technology. And it's going to be led by David Kelly, who's the executive director of the e-Learning Guild. Again, that's June 16th. On June 24th, there's a regional webinar called The Community and Connection in Online Environment for Impact. And that will be with Dr. Farah Valera of Lehigh University's Teaching, Learning, and Technology Graduate Program. On June 30th, we have another chapter webinar, and that will be called Learning and Development's Role in Creating a Better Return to Work Environment. And that will be with Tim Fitzpatrick of the Velocity Advisory Group. I know I read those things very fast, and we also have programs in July, so your best bet is to go to our website, which is www.tdphl.org. Those of you know me, I always say TD was in talent development, PHL like the airport.org. For today's presentation, we're fortunate to have two great people from CorpU, Alan Todd, who's the CEO, and Ryan Taylor, who's the Vice President of Product Management. By the way, today's webinar is being recorded, and that recording, as well as a copy of the slides, will be placed in the member resources section of our website. But know that it's only accessible to our chapter members, which is another reason why you would want to join our chapter if you're not already a member. So I really don't want to take up any of their time because their bios are in the program description. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to both Alan and Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Ryan?
Mark. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mark, for the great introduction, and it's a pleasure to meet with everyone this afternoon. Alan and I are really excited to talk about our method with how to design great digital programs, and it's what we like to call how to blend the art of teaching and the science of learning. And we're going to break that down into 4 key phases, which you see here on the right. And you will see this repeated throughout the presentation so that you know clearly exactly what phase that we're talking about and which one that we're going in depth on. So we're going to talk about the design phase of designing digital programs into the produce phase, running courses, and then the analyze phase. But before we start and go deep into each of these topics here, just wanted to get everyone comfortable and engaged during this webinar event here. And I wanted to bring up a poll here just to get some feedback from all of you and ask the question, what brings you here today? So 3 simple answers here. So are you here to change lives, meaning that you are here because you deeply love learning? Is it a high priority because we're post COVID-19, or is this something that somebody sent to you and asked for you to join? So it looks like we got 50% of the crowd voted here, Alan.
Nice, yeah, keep voting.
Can we get to 100? Can we get to 100? Looks like we got about 10 more to go.
Keep going. So far, so good. It looks like we're dominating with what we fully would have expected, which is most people are in learning and development and talent development because they love learning and they love changing lives. Beautiful.
So let me share out the results there so everyone can see that. The clear outlier, the clear winner. We have a bunch of lovers of learning here.
Yeah, and it is also a priority. I'm guessing the second choice, if everybody had to, they would pick COVID. Interestingly, no one said I did this because my manager invited me. So also nice to see.
Perfect. And the other thing we wanted to get comfortable with is just to start some dialogue in the chat feature as well. So the question that we want to ask, and if you click on the chat icon, it should be in the lower control center of the Zoom app and off to your right. But we want to ask the question to all of you, what do you think drives learning engagement? Do you think it's amazingly high produced videos? Do you think it's quizzes? Do you think it's simulations? Just curious, from your perspective, what do you think drives high learning engagement in the programs that you design?
So we're trying the chat, folks. If you could just click on the chat icon, it's in the bottom center of your screen. Just give us some ideas. Let's just start here and fly through. Interactive and feedback drives learner engagement, allowing them to be involved with content. Relevance and respect, interesting, great. Applies to the work of the student or the participant, super interested in content delivered in different and interesting ways. Keep them coming, these are great. Content that's relevant to the job. Interest based on learner need for use in the workplace, business need, interactivity and feedback, variety, interactivity and relevance. You're starting to see some themes, interactive and easy to apply. Relevance and interactive, relevancy, participant involvement, participant feels the need. These are great. Content and discussion within the presentation. Engaging activities keeps my interest. You get the theme here, engagement and interactivity over and over, and relevance. Very cool.
I like Sharon's, one word and it's simple, simply fun.
Fun, yeah, great.
Well done.
All right.
All right. That was pretty interesting to see there. Alan, do you want to jump in and kind of dovetail off of that question into some examples that we have around great learning?
Yeah, so we're here today to teach you some of the principles that we apply every day at CorpU. And many of these principles are principles that I've been honing for 30 years working at the intersection of technology and education. And I think we just wanted to put up some quotes. Coca-Cola, we're changing the way our industry builds talent, and CorpU is that way. Campbell's a game-changing partner, or this is the future of how people will learn. A Moneyball approach to leadership and development. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that when we get to the analyze phase and tell you what that looks like and give you some tips and tricks and techniques. It works so much better than we ever thought. These are examples that are really about creating high impact, engaging learning experiences. And there are a couple of secrets that we've learned along the way, a couple of principles, and today we're going to cover them. So let's go to the next slide and I'll just sort of give you an example of measuring. So this, I have 3 slides of, these are projects that won awards in an academic industry conference and journal at Columbia University and e-learning in the workplace. And so this was just an example that Coca-Cola presented. The program on the left shows the participants. These were 2 different leadership development programs. One had 86 participants, one had 312. And the value in dollars, the measured ROI or impact. So you can see sort of 5 million on one, 28 million on the other. Next slide. Just some examples. Mattress firm, large national specialty retailer in the mattress category. And we worked with them to develop a new way to launch products to train people virtually versus the old way. So this was done in a virtual environment with 5,000 people and reduced launch time by 88%, saved about $500,000 in the way they used to do it running events. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that in their presentation, the old way, majesty and trust on the left were examples of mattresses that they launched new, and the one on the right shows when they started the new virtual way and implemented it, they had much higher sales and Salesforce readiness. Okay. So now I just wanted to give you some examples just to say that there is a way to design high impact learning. There is a way to measure and analyze what that looks like. And we're going to walk through exactly what that looks like. So if you'll just hit me up with the next slide. 3 big components to design. There's the diagnosis, there are parameters of which you must make some choices about, and there are principles. If we go to the next slide. So let's start with the diagnosis. And this works backwards, right? So if I start with the key questions, when we're designing any learning intervention, we start with asking we begin with the end in mind. What do the results look like? What are we trying to accomplish? What does success look like? That's number 1. Number 2, what capabilities are required to achieve that business performance result that we desire? What are the organizational capabilities? Number 3, what are the individual capabilities? What must people be able to do to drive that capability? What does the learning journey look like to get them there? And finally, what's the motivation to pursue the journey? A lot of people they skip this step, but it's one that I have found is really important, which is, why should I do this? And why should I be motivated? And if you look at the top, these are the phases from pre-learning to formal and informal learning blended to actually building the capability to drive that result. And if you look at the bottom, these are the outcomes. So when I get to step 5, I start with 5. I need people to be focused, intentional, and motivated to go on a learning journey. If I don't practice that step, I don't get very far. Bob Brinkerhoff from Michigan State has done a lot of research and has a model that he calls 40-20-40, but he essentially says that 40% of learning outcomes are predicted from focus, intentionality, and motivation. Those are conditions that exist before we even start learning, 40%. And only 20% of the results are from the formal and informal learning journey, and 40% are what happens afterward, follow through. So I give you that. So anyway, then we make sure in the formal that we're developing to a specific set of knowledge and abilities and a set of mindsets or behaviors. And we need, and as I'm moving to the left, some of the first order effects is we want to see people, we're looking for behavior change. And to me, that means we're looking for them to cement new habits. So are they developing expertise? Are they practicing and developing the capability that matters? And if I move to the next one to the left, sort of the second order effects beyond these individuals learning, is the company supporting? Do we have the right people, the right culture, the right environment? So as we're learning and people are learning, the environment is as critical as any kind of learning that an individual goes through. And then finally, progress and milestones. So we have to be making progress towards doing something that matters. Next slide. So a couple of diagnosis principles that I have found really important over the years. The first is prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So what that means is if you're a learning leader, I believe a learning leader is a professional on the same level of profession like any other professional, a doctor, a lawyer. You are an expert at your craft. And if I'm an expert at my craft, what I won't do is if someone says, I need, and they fill in the blank with some training courses or titles, that's not good enough for me. That's like going to the doctor and saying, I need antibiotics. The doctor would follow with, why do you need that? And so prescription without diagnosis. Diagnosis is about figuring out some of the things on that prior slide. Where are we going? Why do we need it? How are we going to build it? What is the performance gap? So the second one, you cannot fix in analysis that which you've bungled in design. I learned this one from my Penn CLO doctoral program, John Sapovitz, who's a great professor at the Graduate School of Education at Penn. He was taught this when he was in his graduate program 20 years before that. And the idea here is if you were trying to measure impact and you didn't think about it before you ever built or designed the program, you're just not going to be able to, it's really, really difficult. So you actually have to build your impact measurement framework, your learning measurement before you ever start. How will I know? And one way to think about it, there are several, but if you think about closing a business performance gap, it could be an abundance gap. And so we see a lot of those. An abundance gap looks like this. We're doing pretty well today, but we have a vision of where we want to be 3 years from now for our team or our department or our company. And we want to build a capability to get there. And a deficit gap would be, we're underperforming in this area and we need to create some type of learning and development intervention to build the capability that we need to improve performance in that area. So that's closing the performance gap. Next slide. There are 4 parameters formal versus informal, alone and in groups, and the degree of which we're going to blend synchronous, like this meeting that we're doing right now on Zoom, and asynchronous learning, and then peer-to-peer and peer-to-expert ratio. Next slide. So if we look at the idea of learning alone and in groups and ways that are formal and informal, this is something that I think you have to decide. There are many different ways to design learning. Most of what we're going to talk about today is on the right half of this equation. So it's in the top right quadrant. A guided pace cohort has a guide. Somebody is an expert. It has a pace, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it has a cohort, a group of people that are going through a journey together. In the bottom right quadrant, we're in an informal space of learning. That's a community of practice. And in good learning design, the learning design that I like to see, it weaves up and down between the formal and informal spaces of learning for a group of people or cohort. And I'll talk a little bit more about what it means to create active and social learning, or a sociocultural theoretical underpinning of how people learn. That's the sort of the right half. Of course, on the top left half, a lot of, most of our e-learning fits in the top left half, where you take a formal scoped and sequenced program. In the bottom left, it might be learning in the flow of work. Like, I need to figure out how to do something, and I can watch a how-to video, or I can click some links and see things. And so when you're developing learning, what are you doing it for? We CorpU, and hence the talk today, is all about the right half. So we go to the next slide. When you think about async and sync, one thing I've noticed is the K-12 and higher education academic worlds are sort of so, I don't know how to say this, but so appalled with the quality of their online teaching that they've decided that it doesn't deserve the moniker online education. Instead, they call it remote teaching, or they call it remote learning, mostly because most of the institutions were caught off guard. And what they've done is they just take synchronous meetings like this, they take Zoom and put on long lectures. And of course, you all already know this, but that's not great learning design. Great, putting people on, I saw some that are like 4-hour meetings of Zoom. That just it doesn't cut it, as you know, for a whole myriad of reasons. So we have to think about, how do we blend synchronous and asynchronous? And there are ways to do asynchronous with a cohort where they're doing something each day. They have to complete something, and there's conversation going on every day. And then finally, the peer-to-expert ratio. For us, having done this thousands of times, cohorts that are 50 people plus or minus 20, so we can go maybe to as small as 30, as high as 70. And by the way, you don't have, some people do cohorts at 20 or 10, and they have a small team. Does it work? Yeah, but does active learning and social construction of knowledge work really well at like 10? Not so much. The conversation's a little light. And then we always have 2 people running as the expert guides. One is a deep subject matter expert in the material. The other is a moderator and facilitator of discussion. So the key is to get people engaging in dialogue. That's a critical piece of active learning. Next slide. Okay, 10 principles. And I'm only going to go into one of these today because we just don't have enough time. But I'll just quickly give you the principles. Social and active, I'll skip that because that's the one I'm going to give you a couple of tips. The next, practice and feedback. We know that the path to expertise and expert performance is through deliberate practice in a feedback-rich environment. To the extent you create that, you can double, triple, quadruple learning outcomes, but you add that. It's a no-brainer. If you look at the literature, if you look at K. Anders Ericsson at Florida State University, he edited the Cambridge Oxford Handbook on Expertise and Expert Performance. He's probably the leading thinker. Malcolm Gladwell got the 10,000-hour rule from him. But basically, you can read all of that and summarize it to great experts that achieve mastery. They practice deliberately. It's hard. They don't do it. It's not fun. They practice to get better at each broken down skill within a broader capability. Okay, it's a journey, not an episode. I don't have to tell you that, but sometimes people think you train people and it's over. That's not enough. Chunking and linking and multimodal. These are 2 concepts that go together. If you're building virtual learning, we have to chunk, like a social security number is chunked, your phone number is chunked, and that makes it easier for memory, and we already know that. So we have big concepts, we chunk them to small, link them together to teach that concept. And multimodal just means we've got to mode switch the learning activities, read, watch, reflect, discuss, whatever they're going to be. Let's switch them up. Spaced, not massed. So if we follow the literature in neuroscience on spaced repetition, what does that mean? If I massed all the training into an 8-hour day, you would forget most of it. If I spaced that out over 3 weeks and gave it to you in small chunks and linked and have you recall that later, that's called spaced practice. That's called, as we space versus mass, recall, long-term memory, much higher. And if we practice in between, again, huge impact on the outcomes of learning if we can add practice and feedback and we chunk and link and we mode shift and space it. And then we have to blend synchronous and asynchronous. Again, don't too much of one thing. It will only get you so far. The highest impact that we have seen that we push is blending those. Scaffolding is about providing tools, right? A scaffold extends your range and enables you to do things you couldn't do without the scaffold. That's what it's for. Critical component in a socio-cultural constructivist theory of learning. We use scaffolding to drive it. That's a job aid. It's a tool. It could be a PowerPoint. It could be an Excel sheet, a little calculator, a checklist, a to-do list. It could be this slide that says, here's 10 principles. That's a scaffold. The progress principle, Teresa Amable at Harvard has written a number of Harvard Business Review articles and books about the progress principle. But the principle basically says people stay engaged and stay motivated when they feel like they are making progress, when they feel a sense of accomplishment or achievement. If we don't design that in, we rob them of that sense. And it's crucially important that we don't do that. And finally, one of my favorite, and we call it magic moments at CorpU, and we study them all the time. And we keep trying to figure out, how do we create magic moments? So our brains are tuned for automaticity. And what stops you out of automaticity is a little bit of surprise and delight. So how do we design in some surprise or delight? And that's when we get lots of comments. We get these every day and we share them in our whole company. When someone says, this changed my life, this was the best training I ever had, or the best program, or the best coaching. And we design for that every day. We talk about it every day. And we say, where are the magic moments? How are we creating the magic? And that's really the art of teaching, the science of learning, and the magic of connecting people together. Because remember, connecting people to content alone can sometimes be flat or be boring, and engagement and persistence is tough. And trust me, I learned that through decades of e-learning, with forcing people to for compliance reasons in, say, the financial services industry, sexual harassment, diversity, anti-money laundering. And that e-learning is not the stuff I'm proud of in my life. That was the stuff of compliance, and we did a lot of it. The stuff I'm proud of is the stuff that we design where people love it and it changes their life and they cement new habits that make them a different person. They become something new. They become a better leader. They become a better person. That can happen, and you can design that in. Next slide. And I'm gonna stop at just a quick point. So these are the giants in behavior change. Maslow says people learn when they feel safe enough to dare. If you don't create an environment where they're safe enough to dare, you won't get great learning outcomes. You won't get life-changing. You won't get new innovation when they feel safe enough to dare. That is the wellspring of innovation in a business. And last I checked, everybody wants more innovation, but you've got to create a positive and safe environment. And the great Kurt Lewin, behavior is a function of the person and the environment. And the story I always love, the metaphor is, of course, the dirty fish tank. If I have an environment of a dirty fish tank and I take a fish out, I send him away and give him or her great learning and clean them all up and shine them up. I give them a program and they come back with a whole new set of knowledge and skills. When I put them back into the dirty fish tank, I've not changed the environment. And guess what? Their behavior within another week or a month or a quarter, it's going to go right back from where you started. So you've got to think about the person and the environment. And when I put up that measurement framework, I said it's got to change culture. If you're not changing culture as you're changing people, you won't get long-term behavior change to stick. Next one, just on social and active. This is a slide about the difference between passive learning, sometimes MOOC, sometimes e-learning. Now you can add community to e-learning, which all of you said, interactivity, engagement, discussion. So I love to see all that. But what we know, if we look at MOOC outcomes and net promoter scores and studies, I've put some links here. E-learning, Josh Burson did a number of studies, a research analyst in learning and development. You probably know who he is. But corporate learning's average net promoter score across all of corporate learning was +7 last year. And so you see that in that sort of -5 to 15 range with not a strong measurement strategy. And I'll go into that in the analyze phase. But if you can do a guided pace cohort and it's active and connecting people to people, is a very human experience, and use the content as a lens through which they engage in a real conversation about real work, solving problems, generating and spreading ideas, teaching and learning from each other and from experts inside and outside the company, and capturing, sharing that knowledge. If you do that, you can expect to have net promoter scores that are in the world-class level, and you can expect to create 10 times the impact over the investment made. Okay, I think that's it for me, Ryan. Well, I put this slide in for you just to say that that the MOOCs came out of the blocks putting cohorts of 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 in a cohort, and as a result, continuing to push this thing that bigger is better. That experiment didn't work, and you're seeing that people are building cohorts. We do projects all the time with 5,000 people, but I'll tell you what, we typically would break that into cohorts of 50 or maybe cohorts of 75, sometimes up to 100. But I'd rather do 10 cohorts of 100 to get to 1,000 than put 1,000 people in one event. Can I put 1,000 in one event? Of course I can. I can put 10,000. Does it work? No. Will net promoter score go down dramatically? Yes. Will outcomes go down dramatically? Yes. Will impact go down dramatically? Yes. Will engagement go down dramatically? Yes. All of that stuff has been proven over and over and over. Okay. Next. Now it's over to you.
All right. Now, and I apologize if there's a lot of background noise. There's a major storm coming through Philadelphia, which I'm sure other folks on the phone are experiencing right now as well. So if it is bothersome, Alan, just let me know. I'll try to readjust the mic.
I can hear the rain.
Yeah, it sounds like hail slamming into the window. So if it's really bad, just let me know. So now that we talked about a design, the next phase is a produce, and this is where you want to take all the work that you did in design and creating your blueprint and now bring it to life and start to create those magical moments for your participants. And so how CorpU does this, and this is post-COVID, traditionally, whenever you would go and produce your video lectures, you would spend a lot of money sending a video crew either to your site, or you would build out your own video production studio. And so what we did in response to COVID is that, well, we needed to move 10 times faster than what we could do while everything was locked down. And we had to go 10 times cheaper, but still deliver the same quality video, whenever we create our courses. And how we did that is that we immediately created a combat kit, and it's a recommended kit, and there's 3 different ways to configure it to basically set up your own home studio. And we had some recent faculty of ours, Carl Ulrich from Wharton, who's the Dean Professor of Innovation, who he used a combat kit and recorded the entire lecture for his 1-week course. We did the post-production of that, and then we launched the course, within weeks. So we moved amazingly fast. The video is of super high quality. You can go to our open programs and, experience that. But what we do with these combat kits is it not only allows you to produce high quality video lectures, but that same combat kit is what we use to deliver really high and engaging live teaching events. And so that same kit that you use to record and upload to a production team to edit is the same kit that you use to deliver a very well produced live production as well. And so how do we do that? So in our production cloud, we have 4 major phases that that we follow, or steps in the process that we follow in order to produce those video lectures as well as publish that course. And so the first step is around the subject matter expert production. So this is where you're working with the SME and having them write out their lecture and get it down on paper, and then actually film and record using our combat kits. And so that kit makes it incredibly easy to give them something to record high quality video. And then after they finish that, they upload to our production cloud. And this is where some magic moments happen for us and for that video that was just shot. So our creative team is then notified that there's a new video that needs to be produced. We have a graphic artist that creates beautiful graphics to add visual storytelling throughout the video to really bring it to life. And then before we go and test that video, we ensure that we send it through our machine transcription service as well. And what that does for us is we have participants that are all around the globe in over 180 countries that people log in and take CorpU programs each and every day. And so we need to translate that audio into every single language available and have it available as closed captions so that anybody can watch or at least read the audio that's taking place in that video. So once that's done, our creative team then, that video goes to a QA testing phase. And so that's where the learning designer, you would be working with the SME to ensure that everything is absolutely pixel perfect, correct. The audio is a fantastic, all of the visual treatments are beautiful. And then you run an internal test with an internal cohort of 10 to 50, 10 to 20 participants, and then really sweat the details of every activity that you're building out in that course. And then the last step is to then publish that work. And the key thing here is to not only publish it so that people can take the program, watch the video, but one key important point here that I wanted to stress was what we call the CorpU Vault. And that's where all of those video assets, the graphic assets, everything that was used to produce that course is secured in our vault. And that's where all of the assets are stored for life, because it's very common that you might get the first edition of your course created, but maybe a month or a quarter or a year from now, you need to do another iteration of that product and do another announcement, release another version of that course. And so what that allows you to do is go back to the vault, get those same assets, do a quick turn so you can move faster, you can go at a much lower cost, obviously, if you have everything that you used previously and just make a few tweaks along the way. So once you're done with that, then it's uploaded to CorpU, where our platform encodes that so any device can stream that video content anywhere across the globe. So those are the 4 steps. When it gets into a combat kit and the subject matter expert actually producing the video or even performing in a live event, we break that down into 3 video lecture types. And there are 3 ways to produce that high quality video lecture. And the first one is what we say is for the basic user. And that's somebody that might produce about, might use that setup for 1 to 2 hours a month. They don't need an expensive studio quality type of setup. So what we have pre-configured in our combat kit is what we call the desktop lecture light version. And that's somewhat podcast style. That's what you see on YouTube a lot, where you have some desktop lighting, you have a tabletop mic, you're using a high quality 4K webcam, very easy to set up, super low cost, but it's super high quality video. So we have that light version, then we move up to the studio version. Same type of desktop style setup, other than the lights might go from tabletop lights to the umbrella setup that you might see behind the scenes of video productions like in Hollywood. You have the nice 2 or 4 umbrella lights that are set up to really kick up the look and feel of the lighting, within your environment. There also may be a green screen as well. So if you want to overlay slides or kind of do the picture-in-picture, Alan and I certainly experimented with this a lot, where we will actually use slides for our video background with Zoom. It's kind of one of our pro tips, where we actually export slides as virtual backgrounds, and we'll actually click through those backgrounds. And very similar to what Alan's doing now, if you can see him. I'm not sure, but
yeah, sorry.
Click through, but it makes for a really engaging presentation, just because you can see the presenter and you can point just like a newscaster would for the weather, no pun intended.
Hey, Ryan.
Yep.
I also could show just really quick. I'll just show everybody so you can see what I'm sitting in my home. And this is like a replica. It looks like I'm sitting in the Philly office, but in my house, I'm sitting with a green screen covering my bookshelves, and there's a light that's on the green screen. There's an umbrella light that's on me, and you can see a camera. There's a 4K webcam. Okay, sorry, back to you. I just wanted to let people know this is the basically the presenter style kit. I forget I think you're talking a couple $100 for the green screen, and we're shooting super high quality stuff. And and making it look pretty powerful. So anyway, I thought it'd be a cool example. You could see what it looks like.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing that. And I won't go through these in detail, but this is something I wanted to add in this slide deck as a tool for all of you, just to know the three different configuration of the combat kit with links that go to either Amazon or to the manufacturer's website. I mean, there were things that we have tested for weeks upon weeks to ensure that the video looks great, the audio sounds great, the lighting looks great. You know, so you can certainly start here or to purchase these as well. And like Alan said, this is super low cost. I don't think we went above $500, you know, across the board on this stuff. So it's relatively inexpensive. So there's
and I would just say, and we send these combat kits like to faculty from business schools where we're producing leadership development programs, but you might do the same thing if you had like, you know, a $200 camera with a $100 desktop light kit. If you have senior leaders or business leaders that are your subject matter experts, you send them that, your video costs then go to zero. You can make as many videos as you want and publish them in programs. It's really kind of revolutionary, and we were forced to do it with COVID, but it's really reducing the price and going way faster. And the quality is 95% as good as like a fancy video shoot from a bunch of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there will be 3 slides that go through each of those that's pre-configured that you can obviously click and see and kind of understand how we pre-configured those combat kits. So now that you have the kit, there's 8 principles that now that you set up that environment, now it's, okay, now I need to start recording that video. And so we put together 8 principles for the subject matter experts to think about and to go through to ensure that that their setup is picture perfect. And that's being aware of the background, which is why I have a nice little CorpU logo on a TV and, you know, not the news station showing the weather. Or like Alan's using, he's using a virtual background if you didn't notice, or I just, you know, it was the example that he just showed there. And then go through the positioning, making sure that you're in the center of the video, aligning your body. A lot of people are getting used to this. Some of this is very common since the entire world is on Zoom post-COVID now. But it's super critical just so that all of your voice, so the purpose of these is to ensure that the quality and the consistency of your videos are the same each and every time that you record videos. We use Zoom with our faculty to record. There's obviously the baked in recording software as well that actually might give you a little bit better video quality. Like on the Mac, you can use QuickTime to do high quality video recording. On Windows, I believe that is called the Camera app. But those would obviously be the most optimized for your signature type of courses that you want to record. We use Zoom with the faculty just simply because it's easy to get them in. It's easy to start recording and kind of be, kind of do that interview format to ensure that they're producing that video well. Next is to do a couple tests, with the audio to make sure that the audio looks good before you start recording. There's nothing worse than talking for an hour and then going back and realizing that there's zero audio. So nobody wants to do that. And then with Zoom, we like to just go through and make sure that that video is optimized. There's ways to ensure that you're streaming and recording in HD quality video. There's also ways to touch up your appearance so that everybody who is on camera, the video is just kind of tweaked and filtered just a little bit like everyone is used to these days. And then it's time to record and hit the nice big red button there. And once you're done, you save it and then you upload it to some sort of production cloud. For our faculty, they upload that to our CorpU production cloud. So there's a couple additional principles here that I always keep here as some things to consider. I won't go through each one of these, but just has to do about being aware of the clothing, your appearance, the preparation going into a great video, as well as the speech and being very clear and distinct with everything that you say, just so that every type of, just so every person can clearly understand the message that you're trying to convey. And so with that, that's around the production of the actual course. Like I mentioned before, that's the same combat kit is what you will use to run your live synchronous teaching events. And so for the live events, there, we put together, there's a few different ways that we think about the live event. Do you want to run a panel very similar to what we're doing here, where you have some experts that are on the line and doing some Q&A with the audience. And so there's not a lot of engagement except in the beginning of this, all the way to the guided coaching or the guided consulting. And we like to talk about that internally as the karaoke type of event. And so you're really making a decision during that live event. And again, this is defined during the design phase that Alan mentioned previously. So as you're sweating the details of the course, you should also sweat the details of that live synchronous event. Is based on what you're trying to build, is it optimized to have participants to just react to the panelist or to other members? Or do you want to have the participants jumping on video and almost overtaking the conversation because they're so excited, they're so motivated, or maybe they're generating ideas for a new product or a new idea and they're working real time? And so that's all the way over to the right around taking over the performance, which is what we call the karaoke type of event. So just some things to consider and how to use all of these tools that we put together here to not only build great high quality courses, but also deliver that same great quality live during live teaching events. So with that, Alan, I'll turn it back over to you to then get into the analyze.
Yep. So, and if you're wondering why we call it the art of teaching and the science of learning, is because there are a lot of key learning science principles that we follow based on the research and the literature, but there's some art to it. So that's why we have 6 different types of live meetings that you run. What is the level of interactivity? So that's the art kind side, but let's get into analyze. Let's talk about what's the current state of learning measurement. So Michael Beard, Harvard, wrote The Great Training Robbery. So obviously that's, you can tell by the title, it basically says that most companies are not getting any return on their investment in training, and it's not changing individual or organizational behavior. Next slide. Brandon Hall research. Organizations put huge amounts of money into learning, but real insight into impact has been elusive. People do a good job tracking with training, what training people do, but they don't tell the story or they don't do ROI. They rely too heavily on basic metrics. Next slide. LinkedIn just came out with their 2020 workplace learning study. Number one issue facing learning leaders in 2020 and they do a pretty big study. Number one, learning measurement is number one topic. Next slide. This thing has been going on forever. And they say, how do we currently do it? Course completion, learner satisfaction, minutes of learning, repeat visits. Those things are mildly interesting to me. Those are necessary, but completely insufficient to measure ROI or learning impact. They're necessary because we need some quantitative metrics, but we also need some qualitative metrics. Quantitative tells me some number of things, how much of this, and for net promoter score is a very reductionist thing, not very applicable. It's a mildly interesting score for learning, but there's such a richer thing that answers why, and that's where qualitative research comes. But basically, surprisingly, a quarter of L&D pros don't measure learner engagement at all. So, and those that do, the best is there, and they say the industry has yet to converge on a true north metric for engagement. I'm going to give you some metrics for engagement. Next slide. So here's some basic truths about learning measurement that we've distilled from doing this for decades and decades. Number one, people are over-surveyed. So sending more surveys does not make you a lot of friends as a learning professional, talent development professional. Number two, self-reporting only tells a partial story. So we know from the world of academics, we know from research, we know from science, when you do a self-reported study, for instance, a level 1 evaluation, those things are very unreliable. So are they interesting? Yes. Should you do them? Yes. Do they tell the whole story? Absolutely not. So they're good, but they tell a partial story. They're necessary, but not sufficient for learning impact measurement. Number three, dialogue, to me, is the most powerful underutilized management tool that has ever existed. 2,000-year-old technology, frankly, 2 million-year-old technology. It's the art of conversation, connecting people together, to think out loud, to get to shared meaning. That gives you so much more power to analyze those conversations if you capture them digitally. I'll tell you what that looks like. And then the old ways of measurement, sort of slow, inaccurate, intrusive, and expensive, which is why people don't measure it. And you look at the LinkedIn study, the Brandon Hall study, Donald Taylor in the UK, you look at his study, people aren't measuring because they think it's too expensive. And finally, I'm going to show you ways that are fast, accurate, non-intrusive, and inexpensive. There are ways to do it using different methods and tools, using the cloud, using natural language processing, connect people in dialogue, and then using machines to tell us what actually happened after the fact. Next slide. So here's some basic principles that we used to develop a measurement system and a big data analytic driven, cloud driven, mobile driven analytics. This is, we called it Moneyball for learning, and it was kind of it is a Moneyball method. Number one, stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. So there are some good things that came from Donald Kirkpatrick, Jack and Patty Phillips, Bob Brinkerhoff, great stuff. Enrico Fermi, the physicist that's just invented a method of measurement that's really spectacular. Use the least intrusive methods possible. So we believe deeply in non-intrusive data mining. If we're going to figure out what people learned, can we do it without asking them? Are there other ways? And then if we do have to ask them, can we make sure that they get value out of it? So feedback loops are so important. If you just survey them, they don't feel good. But if I actually teach you something and then ask you some questions, so the way we disguise surveys a little bit in the learning design, I think of it as a give and a get. Give them a little something, teach them something, ask them something, teach, ask. And now over the course of a week or a learning design that happens over a guided journey, let's say it's 30 minutes a day for a week or 2 weeks, I can get a little bit every time. And I actually get my survey and they never actually know they were surveyed. They don't feel they're surveyed because you're following principle number 3. You're ensuring participant value. You're giving them feedback loop. If they answer something, get something back. Number 4, surface and amplify important signals. So if I can get people talking and I get cohorts of 50 and I do 10 of them and I have 500 people, natural language processing, I can do sentiment analysis and measure the positive versus negative language use. So we do that kind of stuff. We can tell you, are they leaning in or leaning out? Are they using tentative language? Do they see barriers? Are they scared? Do they feel important? These are the key things. If you think of learning measurement like an iceberg, the explicit information is that which you can see in the iceberg, but the stuff you can't see that's under, the tacit knowledge, that's embedded in the dialogue, and natural language processing helps us see that. The quantitative information tells us scores and did they like it? Did they hate it? Did they stick with it? That's quantitative information. Underneath the iceberg, structured dialogue, the analysis of structured dialogue, natural language processing answers why. To me, that's the goal. Why did they like it? Why didn't they follow through? Why didn't they like it? What barriers? How are they going to knock those barriers down? Analyze, show, don't tell. So show, demonstrate evidence. If we're going to present impact evidence, we better demonstrate it with evidence. We better not be telling something that I'm not trying to make me look good. As a learning professional, I am focused on getting to the truth. And our job in analysis is to find an evidence-based story of the truth. And that's called show. 6, automate for speed, accuracy, and low cost. So you can automate this stuff and get the cost down. It's kind of like combat kits, but we did an analysis. So you're doing things that are beyond Kirkpatrick level 2, 3, 4. You're doing a completely different preponderance of evidence method. And then I repeat, can't fix an analysis, that which we bungled in design, and prescription without diagnosis is malpractice, because I put those in design. So I put them here and analyze. Next slide. Yep, right there. I only have this slide and one more, and then we're going to go back to Mark. And this is kind of this is a big picture, right? So I mentioned Bob Brinkerhoff at the beginning, focus, intentionality, and motivation. That's at the far left. And so I have in the box a question, and underneath it, a measurement that we track measures in data that the system is doing through non-intrusive data mining. But do they need it? Do they want it? Did they do it? Did they like it? Did they learn it? Did they apply it? And did it make a difference? And the next slide, just to give you kind of a sense, what we've done in analysis, and we have a white paper on learning analytics on our website. If you go to resources, I think you probably can easily find it, or you could send me an email. Happy to send to you. But the key to the white paper, because you can do this anywhere, like everything we're teaching you here today, these are the secrets to high impact learning. You can do it on any platform. You can do it on any e-learning system, any LMS. You can do this. And anyway, so from business need, measuring, using data to measure the extent to which they demonstrate evidence of engagement. I'm on the right-hand side here. To measure the extent to which they demonstrate evidence of understanding. Did they surface barriers? Did they surface solutions to the barriers to getting this done? did they make a public commitment to action with the cohort? Did they say, I'm going to go do something? And then did they follow through on that? And tracking those metrics are how we close the gap between business need at the bottom and business result at the top. And that's building on many of the things that were a model made by Donald Kirkpatrick back in the 1950s. And I just think it was great in the 50s and it served us for 50, 60, 70 years. But a newer model is based on the cloud. It's based on big data. It's based on natural language processing. It's based on organizational network analysis, sentiment analysis, discourse analysis. Those are the things that we do and the skills that we are building and developing to build the things to measure learning impact. And they go way beyond self-report. And one of the self-report, I always think it's the Dr. Fox effect, which if you ever Google it, it's an experiment that's been run over and over and over, where you hire an actor to give a lecture that has no experience, and they give a lecture and they get very high level 1 evaluations because they're a great actor and people like them and people are nice and people are kind, and they don't want to write a bad review of someone that they just spent time with. So they write nice reviews on a level 1 evaluation, sometimes called a smile sheet. But essentially the Dr. Fox effect shows you that those things are not very reliable. Okay, now I think we're done. Ryan?
Absolutely. So just wanted to end with everything that we have shared here will be available and even more directly from our website. So like Alan mentioned, we have a lot of resources under the resource tab to learn more about the science of learning. We have a lot of blogs on the topic. We also have, if you want to go on a journey, with us and go deep on how to virtualize your training. Today's the last day to sign up for a program that launches tomorrow. So feel free to go to our website, click on programs, and you can see our open calendar there. So,
and these are all free for all of you.
Absolutely. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark and or Jillian to close us out here. I believe we want to go to some Q&A as well.
Absolutely.
Lose power?
No, thankfully I did not lose power. I think the worst of the storm has passed me by. Yeah, so everyone, if you want to utilize the chat feature to ask some questions, we have a few minutes for Alan and Ryan to take your questions. While we wait for some questions, is there anything else that you guys want to elaborate on?
I was just going to mention before, if anybody actually wants to come up and just enable their microphone as well, we're happy to have some dialogue. I can promote folks to panelists as well if they want to hop on the mic live.
Perfect.
Looks like Robin in the chat said this was a great session. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Feedback.
Yeah, this was a fantastic session, and thank you guys for taking the time to connect with us. Oh, we got a question in. Given that my company will be using the free Moodle, it seems that the platform defines interactive. So I'm not
sure if Martha got to finish her comment, but I would say.
Oh, is this true? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that you can try pretty much everything we just described. You can probably do it or pull it off in Moodle. I mean, it's definitely worth a try. It probably is not perfectly designed for everything that we talked about, but definitely you can connect people in a group in Moodle and engage them, use some of the active learning principles and dialogue principles. But you'll have to do some of the analysis after the fact from that dialogue on your own manually, but certainly can do it. And I'm a big fan of all things in learning. Experiment, right? Just go do it and see what happens. And, it'll work on Moodle if you give it a go.
Yeah, I know, at least from my perspective, using a lot of those tools, you end up requiring to bolt in a lot of other third-party tools to make all the different components, especially around engagement, happen. So those tools might allow you to link out to a piece of content, but you might have to find another tool to do like the collaborative component and another tool to do the live event component. So just be mindful of the participant experience and how they're hopping around between a lot of different tools to have them do all things engagement, going off in breakout groups, having some conversation in a discussion forum app or a group type of a program. So Moodle could be great to point to all of those things. I would just say be mindful of the number of systems that you put in place to try to foster a lot of engagement.
Yeah, and I guess the other comment that I would make for everyone is what we covered in 50 minutes and launches tomorrow basically is a 3-hour course. So it'll be 30 minutes a day for 4 days, followed by a 1-hour live. And if anybody want to register for that, you'll go 3 hours, you'll go deeper in all of these things, and you'll actually be in a group. I don't know how many people are in the cohort, but it's probably somewhere between 30 and 40 people. And they'll be from other companies. And you can, a lot of times the dialogue's really interesting because it's learning and development, talent development professionals that are trying to build great virtual learning, and they're all together sharing ideas. And we're using the content as a lens through which they talk about those ideas.
That sounds wonderful, Alan. Do you have a link that we could just share with everyone in the chat?
Yeah, Ryan?
Sure.
Pop that in.
And a lot of people are excited to learn more on your website. So we'll provide that link for everyone.
Give me 2 seconds.
Absolutely.
I will have that for you here.
Yeah, and I think if you go to CorpU.com, failing everything else, you'll find it.
Yep. Here's a link directly to the How to Design Virtual Learning on CorpU.
Yeah, and that course covers a lot of these same principles. So the part that says on CorpU, if you're not on CorpU, I would say majority of people in those programs aren't on CorpU, and they use it for any other platform. Or it's great if you're a CorpU customer, then it's helpful. And so a lot of customers have learning and development professionals around the world that are taking that as well.